afterwards. And I will also get our live stream set up because we will be live streaming this onto Facebook as well. We will be sending out later the clips for all of these, as well as the candidate questionnaires when we have those kind of in full. We're basically, as soon as we get all of them in, we will make them available to you because they are very thorough, as candidates often point out to us, that we do ask across all of the issues that we work on, we ask a number of important issues to get a sense of what people's priorities are, where they stand on the issues, and what their leadership style is. It's an important thing, again, to kind of educate voters, to educate candidates, as well as to educate the media as well. I think that we can bring up, so we're going through gubernatorial candidates alphabetically first, and then we'll be doing lieutenant gubernatorial candidates. Since the live stream is now started, Zayda, let's both introduce ourselves kind of again for those tuning in virtually, and then we can bring up the first gubernatorial candidate. If one of our tech support can help put her on spotlight after we both reintroduce ourselves. Again, I know probably many of you, Jonathan Cohn, have been chairing our issues and elections committees for a number of years, and I'm kind of the new policy director for Progressive Mass. Happy to have so many of you here with us, joining here, possibly watching online as well. And I'm delighted to have as my co-interviewer this afternoon, Zayda Ortiz.
Hi everyone, Zayda Ortiz, she, her, ella. I am the leader of Mystic Valley Progressives. I am an interim board member, and I am a political nerd and happy to be here sharing the spotlight with John.
Awesome. And then can somebody bring up, if she's in the room, Danielle Allen to add her to spotlight as well. Okay.
Oh, for the love of Zoom.
I've just been apparated.
Okay.
There she is. Huzzah! Technology, it's our friend.
Exactly. There we go.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here. Great to be with all of you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And so basically what we're doing, Zayda and I will be trading off kind of questions across, some on policy, some about to get to know you more, some of them kind of at the intersection of that. But to start off, and then we've allotted 18 minutes kind of total. So keep that in mind you don't need to be too brief in answers, but make sure that you're not taking away from yourself later on. But just to start off, tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're running.
Thank you so much, Jonathan and Zayda. Just first of all, to all of you, your commitments in the areas of justice reform have been with me in my heart all the way through. And that has been true for years, actually. And it's been a pleasure building relationships with many of you over the past months. I truly hope we can have time to continue building relationships. The race is changing, on a daily basis, and I hope we can have all time to see how it unfolds. But so why am I here? I mean, the truth is, for me, the justice questions are at the heart of it. I spent 15 years with my family just trying to help my cousin Michael from his first arrest in 1995. Just trying to help, honestly, rescue him from the oppression and injustice of our system of mass incarceration. And the thing that matters about that is, when I grew up in Southern California, prisons were growing all around me. I could see them all over the place. This was about a personal experience. It was structural, obviously, but the point is that it was personal first. Mm-hmm. And when you have somebody you love in prison, you put all of your time and energy and resources in just trying to help, just trying to get to a decent, safe place tomorrow. And my family, we lost Michael in 2009, lost him to gun violence. He was shot and killed by somebody he had met while he was in prison. He was first arrested at 15 and got a sentence of 12 years and 8 months on that first arrest for an attempted carjacking. And when he got out, 2007, huge amounts of time and energy, and then we lost him in 2009. So the point of saying all that is that as I was with Michael, walking that journey with him, the structural issues were always clear to me, but my family's time was going to Michael. And at the point that he died in 2009, that became the point where it was possible for me to tackle the structural issues. And so I began to use every tool at my disposal to try to do that. So for example, at the helm of a major foundation, the $6 billion Mellon Foundation, we have a philanthropic footprint, or did, I'm not there any longer, of $300 million a year. We became the largest funder of education for incarcerated people in the country. We invested in community colleges. This is a foundation that originally basically invested in Yale and not much else. It had a history of investing in elite higher education. We changed that footprint to invest in community colleges. But even leading a foundation like that, it was clear to me that the work I was doing was nibbling around the edges, and that the only way we could actually bring transformation was through the institutions of state government. And I will tell you that in the fall of 2020, when I started thinking about running for this office, the hardest question I had for myself was, well, what if the Attorney General runs? All right, what if she runs? In many ways, I have respected and admired our Attorney General, but I was very clear in the fall of 2020 that I wanted these issues of justice, reform to our criminal legal system, to be at the heart of the debate. And I did not have confidence that anybody else was going to put them there. And that is the reason I am in this race. The pandemic too, the pandemic brought me to a certain kind of breaking point, those things combined. But when I was weighing, really did it make sense? This was the thing that got me all the way there. So that is why I am running. That is why the commitments I have seen from so many of you have mattered so much to me. I am a person who has been driving change through bureaucracies, through mainstream organizations for 2 decades. I believe we can do that in Massachusetts, and that's why I'm in this race.
Wow, that's an amazing narrative. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thanks, Zayda. I appreciate that.
No, I mean, that's real talk. That's real talk, and I appreciate you sharing that, because it is difficult. As women of color, we all have family that have been incarcerated.
Yes,
it's difficult to in the circles that we inhabit to own that as well as part of our identity.
That is right.
I myself have done a lot of work in the mutual aid space during this pandemic, and have been a stalwart advocate for taking care of people and keeping our communities intact and resilient during this. So our first question is near and dear to my heart, and that's why I'm asking it. How would you evaluate the state's response to the COVID-19 pandemic? And this is going to be kind of a 3-part-ish, but this is it's a combo question. So how would you evaluate the state's response to the COVID-19 pandemic? What would you have done differently? And how would you ensure that we end up in a better prepared space the next time we hit some kind of crisis like this?
Well, I said in my opening remarks that the pandemic was kind of a breaking point for me, and it truly was. And our state's response was a big part of that. So the short of it is just that in February 2020, I could tell that people knew stuff that the rest of us weren't being told, all right? And in various ways, because I am inside a research university where knowledge, emerges earlier there than in other parts of our society and so forth. And in my mental imagination, I started rattling my cage, all right? I started saying, people, we've got to share this. We've got to get the whole picture out and make clear to people, communicate precisely about what we know, what the questions are, and what the choices are. And I could not get the folks I was trying to make that case to act faster. And as a result, I pulled together a big rapid response network, experts and practitioners, mayors from around the country, and community advocates. We put together the first national policy roadmap in April 2020, advocating for a real ramp up of public investment in testing and contact tracing, the infrastructure that we needed. And we did eventually get federal legislation that incorporated our policy and Biden-Harris policy. President Biden signed an executive order with a piece of our policy in his first few days in office. But I worked at the state level too. I reached out to COVID Command. I tried really hard to get COVID Command to work with local faith-based community organizing groups in order to support the contact tracing effort. I found it very difficult to actually get speedy forward movement. We tried to get Governor Baker to move faster on building out testing infrastructure. We didn't succeed. We did succeed in getting Governor Larry Hogan in Maryland to build out an interstate compact to support testing infrastructure. So that's what I did do and would have done if I had been in the role. And going forward, I think it's very straightforward. We have to be really clear weekly communicators about what we know. What's the state of the art knowledge? What do we not know? What are the judgments we're trying to make? And how are we both working on individual safety? Vaccines keep people individually safe. They also help us with issues of community safety. Masking also helps us with that. Rapid testing helps us with transmission. We've got to be clear about the individual part, the public part, but at the end of the day, clearly communicating and building big stakeholder groups, people on the ground in context, for example, educators who know what's actually the challenge that has to be overcome. Hearing and learning from people who are trying to get the work done is at the core of success, I believe.
Great, thanks. And actually, you already answered the follow-up question in your answer. So I will pass.
So getting to be short. As
bonus points for you so far.
Okay.
And I'll pass it on to John.
Thank you. So our next question is that, so some of a governor's agenda requires legislative action, and some of it can be done by the executive branch alone. So the two-part question that we wanted to ask is, what would be your first priority bill that you would try to shepherd through the legislature if elected? And then name one thing that you would want to accomplish early in your term for which you don't need legislative approval, and is something that you view as a major accomplishment to happen just with the powers in the executive itself.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I think we all have a powerful sense of the vision for transformation that we need. And so this is a moment for focusing on execution. How do we get it done? So for that reason, I'm going to reverse my answer to your question. It really starts with the question of who we put in charge of key agencies in the state. Who's going to run Department of Corrections? Who's going to run the state police? Who's going to run DPU and DUI? For me, that raft of appointments is my single top priority. And then, yes, legislation matters too. Absolutely, it's fundamental. And on that front, I would be starting with legislation on housing. It is time for us to make affordability a statewide effort and commitment, with every municipality and region stepping up. We need a roof over every head. That's what we've got to get done. And so I would be working on legislation that's getting that roof over every head.
All right, so we're going to move it just a little bit from policy to a little personal. I'm curious who your political role models are and why.
So Congressman Jamie Raskin is one. He's another professor turned politician, so that's a part of it. And he has a power and fire in his spirit for justice. He makes a distinction between the politicians who are justice politicians and the politicians who are power politicians. And his picture of the justice politician is the person who keeps the justice mission front and center all the time. That's what drives the decisions. That was what drives the coalitions. And I've learned a lot from watching Congressman Raskin do his work.
Great, thanks.
Awesome. And then, so which kind of governors in either Massachusetts' past or in other states would you say that kind of you particularly admire? And what would you seek to emulate about them, or which policy ideas of theirs would you want to introduce or build upon?
Well, let me just actually start with other states first, because those are the sort of more immediate examples, like nearer term examples, since our recent example is not. Anyway, Governor Kate Brown in Oregon, I admire tremendously. And I think that she has driven innovative policies in both areas of housing and climate. She has also been just extraordinarily willing to build horizontal structures of communication and coordination. We have a big agenda. We have a vision for transformation. Execution is going to be about networked sets of big teams. These teams have to be connecting stakeholders and policymakers. And so I think if we want to actually drive the execution, that's the key thing. And she's really been extraordinary at doing that. Here in Massachusetts, I have a lot of admiration for Governor Patrick. I have a lot of admiration for Governor Dukakis. I think Governor Patrick really gave the state a powerful moral vision, commitment to educating the whole child. We still need that commitment to educating the whole child. And it is time for us to really turn the crank on that and our work in education in the state. And Governor Dukakis, wasn't afraid of big things, at the end of the day. And we've gotten to a place where we have a state government that is afraid of big things. It is time to move past that.
Thank you. Name one word that people who work with you would use to describe you.
Listener.
Nice, nice. And name one word that people who work for you would use to describe you.
Listener.
I love it, love it.
Okay, I'm gonna do kind of a little long one here. So as a note, this is kind of a narrow organization is Progressive Massachusetts. How do you define the word progressive when we're talking about, what does that word mean to you as you approach policy?
It means two things. It means transformation and justice. Justice is the entire point of politics. It is the point of what we build together. We can forget that. Sometimes we can think the point is the economy. Well, actually, we need a healthy economy so that people can have healthy and flourishing lives. And having healthy and flourishing lives, that's the project of justice. The economy is a support for the work of justice. So at the end of the day, I think we have forgotten what the point is. And I think progressives remind us, make us focus on what the point is, call us to it, call our hearts to it, call our efforts and energies to it. And then transformation, because you can't just nibble around the edges. If you really embrace that commitment to justice, you do need to do serious work. You've got to change who is at the decision-making table. You've got to change the priorities of your institutions. And you've got to be really clear about how the different tools that you can get from the public sector, from civil society organizations and so forth can come together in this shared direction. So that for me is what progressivism stands for.
Thank you. Well, again, I'm going to keep harping on it because it's my issue, immediate issue right now. Back to kind of the pandemic, it has really shown us. I knew there was poverty in this and income inequality in Massachusetts, but I really think it's really highlighted. In the town I live in, Malden, we pressured the city council to create that moratorium where people were, my biggest fear was that people were going to be unhoused. And the food insecurity was just crazy. Every Monday, I would drive 300 meals into Chelsea and just see the blocks and blocks of line, people standing in the cold. So with all of that kind of in mind, I just really feel like it's festering in a state that has such despairing income inequality. How would you address it? And why do you think poverty still exists here in Massachusetts?
Thank you so much, Zayda. That is so important. And like you, I had the same experience. We all have. We know what the structural problems are. We have felt them in our own lives. And even so, the pandemic was like an X-ray, right? It was like, there it is in the starkest relief you could possibly see. Some people, myself included, riding it out on Zoom while the bottom just fell out from under with such personal devastation to families and individuals. And so the short of it is, this coming election is going to be a debate about the economy. It really, really is, okay? And it's not going to be enough to nibble around the edges. We have an economy that is designed to produce inequality. We have booming growth around our metropolitan core and other parts of the state where we literally have a contracting economy, net negative job growth, okay? And so how do we reverse that? It is about infrastructure development. And that is, a roof over every head is about human dignity. It's about what people deserve, but it's actually also the anchor for the economy. Employers can't actually build small businesses when they can't find a workforce that can have affordable housing within range. We've got to electrify our trains. It is time for us to have a transit and transport network across the Commonwealth that, again, supports people getting to work, supports business formation and growth, because people can get to work, also driving that transition to sustainability. So the debate about the economy is going to be, how do we spread the opportunity to connect to our growth and productivity? Not enough to focus just on collective GDP, got to focus on good jobs. Are we really getting good jobs all over the Commonwealth? So got to get a roof over every head, got to electrify the trains, got to spread good jobs. That's how we get an economy that is actually not generating inequality, but is generating shared prosperity.
Great. Thank you again. And so two quick questions that are just kind of more of like a get to know you. So what has been your, as we've all had a number of, let's say time being stuck at home during the pandemic, what is your favorite binge watch during COVID that you've discovered?
Oh gosh, I wish I had a favorite binge watch. I'm afraid it's a binge game. So honestly, it's Mario Kart with my kids. And I'm terrible, which is very embarrassing given the amount of time I put into it over the last couple of years. In fact, my son has offered to give me private tutoring on my driving skills on Mario Kart.
Wow. And so my thing is, I have found that I always need kind of time for reflection and to recharge. And so my question is, what's your favorite spot in Massachusetts to go and recharge?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you. I love the Cape, honestly. And my family loves different parts of the Cape. We try out different things, but we love the beaches on the Cape. So we are sort of always, that's where we go in the summertime. I also just honestly love walking along the Charles. You're still in the middle of the city here, but that's what my regular routine is. And nothing is more beautiful than the sun coming up over our gorgeous city of Boston in the very early morning.
Agreed. I love the sunset myself.
Good choices. And then for kind of our final kind of closing question is, after you talk with a voter, how kind of in brief would you want them to, how in one sentence would you want them to describe you as the takeaway from the conversation?
The person who's gonna see what we all deserve, a roof over every head, electrifying those damn trains, getting good jobs across the Commonwealth, and who has the skills, experience, and commitment to get it done.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much. If you can drop into the chat or just quickly, just now, if people want to learn more about you and your campaign, where can they find information?
Thank you. Please visit us on our website, allen4ma.com, ALLENFORMA.com. And if you want to combat money in politics, spread the word about our website. All right. That's the cheap approach to getting the word out. So we'd be grateful for that assistance. And I hope to earn your endorsement. I hope you will give this process time. As I said to start, the race is changing on a daily basis. I hope we can all have the time to build relationships, test the questions, and really see where we are down the road.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
And I've seen questions in the chat. We will have the opportunity, as I noted, we'll be posting questionnaires that we've gotten on kind of all the candidates in not too long. So you'll have the opportunity to go on deep dives, even more to different policy detail with them. And can one of our tech people bring up the next candidate if she is present?
Have a great afternoon.
Great to be with all of you.
Yeah. I get a Zoom applause for Danielle as she leaves. Awesome. Thank you. Next up, and thank you tech support for the quick changes going on here. Welcome, Senator Sonia Chang-Diaz. As noted before, Zayda and I will be have some co-interviewing. We'll be trading off between questions, some of them policy, some of them leadership style, some about just getting to know you kind of a little bit more. But to start off, can you just take a few minutes, tell us who you, and step back, we'll have 18 minutes total, so keep that in mind when you're answering different questions. But start off, tell us who you are and why you're running.
Gotcha. Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks, Progressive Mass, everybody, for having me. Before I dive in, want to say thank you and a special shout out to all of the Progressive Mass staff, which is exciting to have now, as well as board members for just doing these labors of love and organizing us and keeping us on the path to justice. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sonia Chang-Diaz. I am a mom. You might hear my little ones running around in the back here. Bear with me on that. I am a former public school teacher. I am Massachusetts' first Latina and first Asian American state senator. And I am running for governor because every day in Massachusetts, it is getting harder to live here, to raise a family here. Housing costs are going through the roof. We've got some of the worst traffic congestion in the nation and the fastest growing student debt load. Healthcare and childcare are getting more and more expensive, and kind of, hovering over it all are the consequences of climate change that are barreling down on us. And the truth is that leaders on Beacon Hill have been telling working families to wait for too damn long for real, meaningful change on these problems. The fire that I bring to this race comes from my past. My dad was an immigrant to the United States from Costa Rica. He came with $50 in his pocket, but with the help of teachers and lunch ladies and librarians, he made it not only to college, but he made it to space. And he became NASA's first Latino astronaut. My mom is a social worker and a woman of faith. And she spent her career helping women and children struggling on the margins of society. Each of them in their own way taught me about our country's incredible potential and opportunities, and how the only way that we're going to deliver on them is to raise our voices together, take action, and fight for our best values. Now, those lessons have stayed with me my entire life. Working as a public school teacher in one of the poorest school districts in the state, Lynn. Shout out to any folks on the Zoom from Lynn. Every day there, I came face to face with the way that the gap between have and have not communities and Beacon Hill's willful inattention to that gap narrowed the life choices for my kids. And it's also stayed with me over the past 13 years as a state senator, fighting like hell alongside many of you guys for bold transformational change. I have seen firsthand that we have still got too many people in government, including leaders in our own party, if we're being honest, who are more concerned with holding on to power rather than doing something with it. And that's why it's getting so hard to live and work and raise a family here. I'm running to change that, because over the past 13 years, we have also shown that we can, in fact, win big, right? $1.5 billion with a B in progressive education funding, criminal justice reform, police accountability, LGBTQ rights, all the way back when I think to Corey reform, right? My first term. So we do not have to accept the world as it's presented to us. I have seen real systemic change, the kind we all crave, happen before in our Commonwealth. And that's how I know that we can provide a quality, affordable education to every one of our kids in Massachusetts from birth into adulthood. We can pass a Green New Deal to win the fight against climate change and create tens of thousands of good paying jobs at the same time. We can close the racial wealth divide, rebuild the middle class, make it so that our young people's economic fortunes look better and not worse than their parents. Together, we have already shown that this future is possible. Actually, gets my ringing cell phone there. That's my ribbit, my cell phone. We've shown that this future is possible. We just need to stand together. We got to see each other's fights as our own. And we've got to elect a governor who doesn't just say the right words, but who's shown that she will take action on tough fights, even when it's politically uncomfortable and inconvenient, to deliver the bold transformational change that we need. If that's the kind of future you want to grab with both hands, one that you think is worth rolling up your sleeves for and fighting for with me, I'm asking you to join me. No one is entitled to this office, my friends, and I'm not taking any voters for granted. That's why our campaign is working, organizing, listening to people all across the state to hear about the change that they need and to build the movement, not only to win the corner office, but to deliver once I'm elected. That's why I'm asking for your support at Progressive Massachusetts. Few things would make me prouder than to continue on, in the trench with you as we have for years now. When it comes to winning real change for Massachusetts, the reality is we are not limited by natural resources. We're not limited by technology. We're not even limited by public opinion. Our biggest obstacle is a lack of urgency from elected and appointed leaders to take action in order to forge a new future for our state. I didn't get into this race because I thought it was going to be easy or because I saw a good career opportunity. I got into it because I have stood on the front lines with families across our state my whole life, and I know the urgency of the moment that we're living in, and I know the future that we absolutely can build together. I'm excited to go build it with you and to partner with you on this growing campaign. So thank you so much, and let's get to it. I am counting on you guys to not hold back. I know you're going to kick the tires, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Sonia. Again, a pleasure. And as a kid who grew up in Texas and Oklahoma, and also a NASA nerd, I knew about your dad before I knew about you. So, again, representation is so important. So it's amazing. So big fan of your dad's. But I did a lot of work as an organizer when COVID-19 first started. I helped organize a mutual aid group in the Malden area called Malden Neighbors Helping Neighbors, because a bunch of people that I actually never had met stood up and raised their hands and said, hey, our government is failing us. What do we do? How do we keep our neighborhoods and our city intact? So my first question, which is again near and dear to me, is about the COVID-19 pandemic. How would you evaluate our state's response to this pandemic? And what would you have done differently? And how can we ensure that we'll be better prepared the next time something like this happens?
All right, so I think, most important to talk about the forward looking. So I'll just say, very quick touch on the evaluation question. The fact that our state has, exceeded national averages on various metrics of confronting the pandemic, I think is in spite of rather than because of our state government's response, right? We are a healthcare capital of the world. We have, some of the highest educated and most resourced people in the United States. Right, so we damn well ought to be exceeding the national averages by a long shot when it comes to our vaccination rates and infection rates and the like. Although infection rates, we do have a more densely situated population, obviously. So there are a lot of things we could have done better. And look, in fairness, no one, no executive can anticipate everything about a pandemic like this. There are going to be unknowns, but there were things that were entirely anticipatable, right? Predictable, and in fact predicted in this pandemic that we could have and should have done better on, starting from the very first week of the pandemic, right? I remember talking with colleagues and grassroots leaders across the state in the first week or two of the pandemic and saying, we know this is gonna be like a repeat of Hurricane Katrina if we don't do something different, right? And God, please, can we have learned that lesson by now? And we've got to shore up our social safety net systems. We have to get in there and sort of get into the breach where we know disparity is going to occur. And we did not do that adequately as a state. We had to fight tooth and nail to get the eviction and foreclosure moratorium, to get transparency and data collection passed into law during the pandemic. And even since that law has been passed, signed, the Baker-Polito administration hasn't been in compliance with it, I think, for a single day. So those are things we could have done differently. And then fast forward to now, the vaccine rollout, right? We all remember the Hunger Games, right? And the ways that getting a slot, getting an appointment for a vaccine in those early, few months was billed as a lottery, but it was really more like a raffle, where, all kinds of advantages, structural advantages got you an extra ticket, or an extra 10 tickets in the raffle. And then fast forward to now, totally predictable that we were going to see a spike in demand for testing around the holidays, right? When there would be a spike in transmission during the winter months, and that we were going to have more demand, as folks came back from holiday travels and to get back into school. We could have been much more prepared for that. And those will be my guiding principles going forward, even though we can't anticipate everything, is, proaction, right? Anticipate what is anticipatable and be prepared for it. And, be a partner with localities and businesses and families. So it's not just about standing at a podium and saying, be safe, everybody, stay safe, get vaccinated, keep your school doors open, but actually being a partner with people and making those realities, come into being. And then equity, right? At every turn, in every consideration, how can we be knitting this disparity, this gap closed?
Okay, awesome. And thank you so much. So some of a governor's, but as you know, from your work in the legislature, some of a governor's agenda requires legislative action, and some of it can be done by the executive branch alone. So what would be a top, let's say, one kind of top priority bill that you would want to shepherd through the legislature in the early part of your term, if elected? And then what is one thing that you would want to accomplish early in your term for which you don't need legislative approval?
Ooh, I love this. This is such a thoughtful question. So I'll say right off the bat, universal quality early education is something that is going to take, legislative buy-in, right? We're going to need to set up, both the funding structures and the just the legal structures for that. That's legislation that I have been filing for many years now to extend, our existing, and we can use a lot of our existing pipes and our existing infrastructure at a minimum to extend our existing funding structures for K through 12 back to serve, 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds. And then I'm also a supporter of the Common Start legislation to make sure that, from the 0 to 3 years, that we are making childcare and early education universally cost accessible for families. So that's one that would have to go through legislative approval, and, building those winning coalitions, right, to get things done, even when they seem hard, is something you guys have seen me do in partnership with you, thank God, over the past 13 years. That's how we got the Student Opportunity Act. On the executive front, I would say tackling climate change. Certainly there's more we can and should do legislatively, but there's also a ton that we can do, through the powers of the executive branch. And that will begin right out of the gates by appointing people, to the DPU, for example, the Division of Public Utilities, who give a damn, right, about pursuing the agenda of tackling climate change and transitioning to a green energy economy, and as well as numerous other appointments throughout our energy and environmental affairs infrastructure.
Great, thanks. So here's a kind of a softball, kind of get to know you question. Who are your political role models and why? My heart's answer on this is that I gotta not leave out the parents who heard me talk a little about. They would not think of themselves as politicians, or political at all. Like my mom even used to beg her, can we have a newspaper subscription as a kid? And she said, I don't want to subscribe to the newspaper. It's too depressing, but she never missed an election. But I think, what you're looking more for here is folks that right? You don't all know my parents the way that I do. Although Zayda, you have that early, knowledge. So I would say, I would put Elizabeth Warren and John Lewis at the top of the list because of the way that both of them have, I think, come into government service not as a career move, but as a with a true sense of mission, right? And have fought tooth and nail for the things that they believe in. And particularly when I think about the sweep of John Lewis's career,
you know, how he brought an organizer's sensibility and an organizer's methodology, you know, from the outside in. But even over, you know, that long sweep of his time in public office and elective office, never, you know, lost his way, never lost his anchor, never lost that moral fire, which is not easy, right? It's a bubble, right? In many ways in government. And so retaining that anchor to why you came in the first place is something that, you know, that brings John Lewis into my, you know, pantheon of political role models. And for both of them, people who have, you know, fought hard and accomplished real things that are having real impact in people's lives, and that will outlast them years after they're gone from office.
Good choices. Also for the parents. So somewhat similarly in vein, but which governors, either in Massachusetts' past or in other states right now, do you admire and why? And what would you seek to emulate about them, or which policy ideas of theirs would you want to introduce or build upon?
That's a hard one for me, honestly, because Jonathan, in my political memory, we have had almost all Republican governors. So, you know, in my political memory, right, I can remember Duval and I can remember the Duke.
And you can go to other states as well.
Right, but so other states, I just like, my head is in Massachusetts, right? So, you know, so I'm gonna say, you know, I'll pull a couple of qualities from both Governor Dukakis and Governor Patrick that I would seek to emulate. You know, my memories of Governor Dukakis as governor, right, are, I was young, so, but I remember now, I have met so many people along the way who have gone on to continue their public service in various fashions, who got their start in the Dukakis administration, and speak with such pride, you know, about their start in the Dukakis administration. So that's something that I have actually always prided myself on as a legislator, is the talent pipeline that we are pulling into public service. And that, you know, one of my favorite sayings in activism is that if you're doing it alone, you're not doing enough. Right. So having an incredible team of people, you know, who populate your administration, who can get out there, you know, and like fight hard and organize hard and just like churn, right. So that we can accomplish a lot of change on a lot of fronts all at once, is, you know, as a quality that I would pull from the Dukakis administration. And also, not for nothing, just the leading by example, right? Like everyone, I think, has that vision of Michael Dukakis, private citizen, just like, or, you know, just picking up trash, right, on the town green. So, and riding the T. And then with Duval, I still don't know that I've ever heard a more consistently inspiring orator than Duval Patrick, right? And who was not afraid to talk about his values. And that is something that I still think is a lesson that we as progressives are, you know, have to keep learning, you know, with each, you know, few years, that that we lose when we run from our values. And when we embrace them proudly and we fight for them, that is a winning strategy.
Great. The next question, name one word that people who work with you would describe you, and name one word that people who work for you would describe you.
It's funny when you said work with me, what I thought it was people who work for me. So I had to rejigger. So by with me, I think you mean other elected colleagues.
Yeah, I mean, however you want to interpret it. And if it's one word to describe both, I'm fine with that as well. However you want to interpret it. It's up to your interpretation.
So I'm going to try and merge and pull off a little, you know, cheat here. I'll merge the two and give you like a phrase rather than a word, which is ask a lot of questions. I think definitely my staff would say that, you know, both on the campaign side and the State House side. And I think probably also my colleagues, my elected colleagues would say that.
So on a lighter note, since during the pandemic, we've all ended up spending like far too much time at home. What is the favorite binge watch that you've discovered during COVID?
I'm going to go with the current, which is right now, my husband and I are in the middle of Ted Lasso, which, look at that, you know, I have a love in common with Charlie Baker, reaching across the aisle. But I don't know if for any of you who have, you know, been Ted Lasso watchers, I just can't get the thing out of my mind when he high fives the tree, you know, walking out of the boss's office. And I just love that show.
A broken clock's right twice a day too. So yeah, exactly. And lastly, like I, during the pandemic, have done a lot of kind of like trying to reflect and recharge. Name a place in Massachusetts that you go to recharge your batteries.
Oh, my bed.
That is a place in Massachusetts.
Yeah. I have not been there during the pandemic, but I will say that the courtyard of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum is one of my favorites.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
You know, to find some peace and reflection.
Thanks.
Nice. And then for our closing question is, after you talk with a voter, how would you want them to describe you in one sentence?
I think she cares about me, and she has fire in her belly about the work of government.
Nice. Good answer. And then before we round things out, if people want to learn more about you and your campaign, where should they go?
I will drop the chat in the drop the link in the chat. If you guys, is the chat open to everybody?
Yeah. Yep.
I guess I'll drop it in the chat. But SoniaChang-Diaz.com is the main page. I know there's some nerds here, which I say with love, nerd love. So there you go, Sam put it in. So there's also an issues page up there that you can get to from the homepage. And then Sam, if you've got it at your fingertips, I would ask you also to go to our delegate sign up page. If this is, you know, a movement that you want to roll up your sleeves for, in addition to your support here at Progressive Mass, we are organizing like heck for the caucus process in a few weeks. So we'd love it if you would join us there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And then can we get a round of Zoom applause for the senator?
Thank you guys. Right back at you.
I wore my big hoops just for you.
We're gonna have a quick kind of few minutes of break, and then do the start with the kind of marathon of the 5 lieutenant governor candidates. So we will allow people, if you want to get a drink or go to the bathroom, bio break,
yep,
or get something to eat.
Stretch. We need to stretch.
No,
a snack.
I can note that to the one question in the chat, we've been holding candidates kind of in a breakout room before it's their time to talk. And then to see the question from Mark, we've been recording the whole thing. It'll be available to watch on Facebook, as well as available on our YouTube page. And once we get all of the candidate questionnaires in, we will be sending like a whole package of follow-up. And
the candidate questionnaires are deep dives. So if your issue is not being discussed in these questions, don't worry. They are detailed pages and pages of questionnaires where we go over the nitty gritty of politics. So if you care about immigrants, there's questions about that. If you care about the climate, there's questions about that. If you care about the economy, there's questions about that. So this is kind of more a space to just really kind of get a good feel for the candidates. So I have seen a lot of questions about different things, and I'm really glad you know, that people are showing what they care about, because that's also important too for candidates to see that. And I just really excited how interactive everybody is, because there's nothing better than having an in-person meeting. And I don't know about anybody else, but it's just been such a struggle. And just to see how we've all kind of adapted and figured out how to do campaigning, meeting, and keeping community and keeping the ball rolling has just been amazing.
And then I'll just quickly note that if any of the people who are, we're not going to go through the hassle of formally bringing anybody up or spotlighting, but if anybody here is a current elected or a candidate, you want to just introduce yourself in the chat, feel free to do so. You may have already done so, but I've seen some, and thank you for being here. And as I'll do another shout out to everybody who has signed the pledge card for the Fair Share Amendment during this. We are now only 49 away from our goal, and I will drop the link in the chat. And if you can share it with friends and fill it out if you haven't yet, we might reach that goal during this meeting. I feel like I'm doing an NPR drive right now.
John, is this when I start putting on my NPR voice and we offer off some flowers from Winston or something, right?
Right.
We do need DJ Jess. We absolutely do.
Yes, yes. Just shout out to Jess's job as a DJ for our past trivia night. It would have been shout out to the trivia night that we did in September, and thank you to all who were there and will join in future times. If anybody would like to sing for the 1 minute before we start back up again, you are more than welcome to do so if you don't have a terrible voice. But
yes, and thank you to all the electeds who are here too. Sorry, I'm gonna shout out to my homie out in Waltham, Jonathan Paz. Good to see you. And Willie from Somerville. Aw, I love you too, babe. Big hearts. Like I said, I'm hooked. Okay. I'm working my hoops today.
Since it's 2:30, we can bring up if the first lieutenant governor candidate is here. We can now start up.
Let's get it going. Welcome back, everyone. If you're here,
long time no see to everyone here. Let's see, is the first candidate here? Okay, wonderful.
Welcome.
Bret, thank you for joining us. I just need you to unmute. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. As such, now we're beginning our interviews with lieutenant gubernatorial candidates. My wonderful co-interviewer Zayda and I will be rotating, asking questions, kind of a set of questions. Same for all of the candidates. To start off, can you just tell? And you'll have 15 minutes, so keep that in mind when thinking about the length of different answers. But to start out, tell us a little bit of who you are and why you're running.
So my name is Bero, and I'm running for a reason. I believe that COVID has now moved from being a pandemic to it is now endemic to our lives. And consequently, I think Massachusetts is at an inflection point. I think we need to build a new foundation for living and working in a post-COVID environment. And so I think that I bring a different set of experiences to the table, distinctly different from the other candidates. I've been a small business leader. I've owned a small business in Massachusetts for over 20 years, so I understand the challenges of creating economic revitalization. I am on the faculty at Babson College, and my wife is an occupational therapist in one of the Metro West school districts. So I understand the challenge for educational stability and excellence of keeping the schools open, but the classrooms safe for both the teachers and the students. And I served on the largest environmental testing company in North America for the better part of a decade. So I also know the importance of addressing climate change and the opportunity, the unique opportunity for being a leader in alternative energy sources if we can introduce environmentally responsible legislation and policies and programs. My parents, my kids, and my grandkids all live in Massachusetts, so I do have an understanding of what it takes for a range of different families to live and work in Massachusetts. And while others will talk to you about their experience at the highest levels of government, I'm proud to say that I worked at the lowest level of government, serving as an appointed official on the Town of Carlisle Finance Committee, helping address the services delivered locally. And so for all of those reasons, if you believe, as I do, that it benefits the ticket to have complementary skills and experience rather than duplicative experiences, then I would hope that you would consider me for Lieutenant Governor. And that's why I'm running, because I believe that I can help make the ticket stronger. And I really got involved for two key reasons. First is because of the unique situation that we confront the challenges, primarily, as I said, the in economic revitalization, education stability, and environmental responsibility. And because I think that it's time for us to start to make a difference. There's a lot of people that have sat on the sidelines, but after January 6th, the insurrection attempt that's there, I think it's important to get involved. And so, although I'm 63 and therefore late to the political world, by the same token, I felt the calling because I didn't feel like I could sit on the sidelines. And I appreciate the fact that the Democratic Party has been open to people like me joining it, because I think expanding the tent is a worthwhile exercise. So that's an overview, and let me just turn it right back to you. Happy to answer any questions you have on any topics.
Great, thanks so much, Bret. Nice, very nice meeting you, and great intro. On that point, I did a lot of work during the pandemic. I'm a community organizer in the Malden area around the COVID response. I joined a bunch of neighbors to try and keep the diversity and our community together. So my question to you is around COVID-19. How would you evaluate the state's response to the pandemic, and what would you have done differently, and how can you ensure that we'll be better prepared for the next crisis?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'm going to give us a grade that has two components. We started poorly, but we finished strong. Here's why we started poorly. And I will caveat by saying, look, it was unprecedented, right? You have to go back to 1918 to us having a similar situation. So in fairness, I don't think anybody started great, but we did a whole host of things wrong. First, in developing the website for where you would go to get vaccines, we developed it with an out-of-state software company when this state is geared towards software companies. So that made no sense at all. It was not a good relational database where you enter it once and you can go anywhere. We didn't do a good job of getting distribution locally. My parents, who are in their late 80s, live on the Cape. And I had to send my sister down to drive them 2 hours up to Wayland to get a vaccination because that was the only place they could get one. That just makes no sense to me. So I think that was a problem. I think we had a problem in how we rolled it out to the schools. I don't understand how teachers aren't considered first responders in a sense, or equivalent. I mean, I recognize they're not first responders, equivalent to first responders because of the number of people they're coming in contact with. And if you want to keep the schools open, which I think we do, but safely, then why wouldn't you make the teachers an early up on the vaccination? So I thought that didn't make sense. I think the nature of the rollout was poor. It was not uniform. There were certain areas that got more support sooner than other areas. And I think that is not strong. Now, I will say this, though, to the credit of the state, it did learn, and it ended up at the end, this is one of the better states at doing it. Having said all that, the final thing I would say about it is, if you only view it from the medical perspective, which, as we just talked about, had pluses and minuses, you're also missing a bigger part of the picture, which is there was massive economic destruction from the pandemic. Now, nobody caused it, so I'm not blaming anybody. It was a uncontrollable virus that started. But we didn't do a good job of responding economically to it also. Small businesses, which are 45% of our economy in this state, were devastated. And we could have done a much better job on that. I'll pause because I know you got a whole bunch of to talk about that all day. But so let me stop.
Great, well, thank you. So the next question is going to talk a little bit about kind of the role of the lieutenant governor itself. And so I have two different parts to this. One is, how would you describe kind of the role of the lieutenant governor and what role the office can play in helping to advance progressive policies in the state? And then to drill down to one specific function of the office, the lieutenant governor chairs the governor's council. And so, although often overlooked, the governor's council plays an important role in judicial confirmations, parole board confirmations, and pardons and commutations. And what are the priorities and perspectives you'd bring to that part of the job?
Yeah, sure. So let me answer the second one first, and then I'll answer the first one second. So for flipping that around on you. Mm-hmm. So look, I think that the role of the only formal role of the lieutenant governor in the council, governor's council, in picking judicial appointments and paroles and things of that mm-hmm. nature. I think the important thing is to not only consider the skills and the expertise and the background of the person, but also the environment. So I'm a product of first generation parents that went to college, right? And put themselves through. And my orientation is, it's important to have the people in the communities that you're from that bring different perspectives to the table. And so I think when we talk about the governor's council, but more importantly, the role that it plays, the role is ensuring appropriate diversity so that we do have the diversity. All too often you'll get, a candidate or two candidates, and they're not really distinctly different from anybody else. They are replicas of what we've had before. I think it's incumbent, even if you can't agree on who it is, to have candidates of a diversity and be very transparent in who you're considering and why you're considering it so that decision can be made. Mm-hmm. I can answer more on that later, but I want to get to the other piece that you answered, which is what's the role of the lieutenant governor? Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's a glitch, but it's a feature that it has no formal role. Therefore, you can define it in a way that it adds the most value. Mm-hmm. The last couple lieutenant governors have focused on working with their local communities, and I think that's great. But I think we're in a unique situation. And the unique situation is that our small business economy, particularly in our forgotten towns and our gateway cities, were absolutely destroyed by COVID. And we need somebody who understands how to do economic revitalization for those communities. Now, I will also say, I don't think one size fits all. The needs of businesses on Cape Cod, which is very seasonal, versus startups in, say, Cambridge, which have technology or life science, have different needs, versus where I was from. My business was from Orange and Athol, right? They need manufacturing, and they're not near large centers, et cetera. So there's different needs from different locations. And I think the role of the lieutenant governor is not to lead from the State House. It's to lead from the front lines. It's getting out in those communities, working with their leadership, the elected town officials, the appointed officials, and also the leaders in the business community. And I'm talking about small business because, like I said, 45% of our economy and 99% of the companies in Massachusetts, working with them to create businesses that create jobs. Because at the end of the day, creating entrepreneurship in small businesses is a great social program because they hire locally, they buy from other local businesses, and they reinvest in their community. And if we really want to get equality in life, the best way to do that is to promote entrepreneurship in communities of colors and other disadvantaged areas. And so I would view my job as lieutenant governor being out in the field, if you will, working with the communities and those leaders to help create economic growth and, frankly, economic equality in all our communities.
Great, thank you. So you said you come to politics late in life. So I'm gonna ask the question, but I'm gonna give you a little help. Who are your political role models or your role models in general, if you don't have a political role model?
Oh, no, I absolutely do. You could actually see the little thing insignia on my wall there. I married my high school girlfriend, and she needle pointed me the presidential seal for my high school graduation, and that is it. So it is.
Oh, wow.
It is still there. So yeah. So when I was a kid, there was a very popular thing in education, which was a lot of free time. So I would go to the library and read John Kennedy's press conferences. They actually had a transcript, and so I grew up, believing in the concept of what John and Robert Kennedy espoused, which, the best slogan was, we go to the moon not because it's easy, because it's hard. It pushes our talents and it pushes our skills. So, and I liked the values and the ideals that they stood for and their pragmatic approach to getting there. Having said all that, I would tell you that the president that I think is most applicable to our current situation was Theodore Roosevelt, because he navigated us through moving from an agrarian economy to an industrial economy. And he was known, we forget it, I recognize he's not much studied now. He was known as the great regulator. He put in a lot of the policies and programs to ensure things like our food was safe and our working conditions were safe. And I believe that as we evolve past, we've already gone from industrial to information, but as we go past the information age into this new age, whatever it will eventually be called, whether it's the experience economy, whatever it is, because we talk about the gig economy and things like that, I believe that we fundamentally need somebody who's got the knowledge and experience to help us navigate that, because we can't go into it in just a reactive mode. I think government has a role for helping us get the values that we want defined. And, I think if you actually went back to a president that navigated that, I think he did a great job. And I recognize it's ancient history. Most people don't know it, but he is also one of the guys that I like to think of as kind of an idealized leader for us.
Thank you. No, that's great.
And I do recognize, because they're from a different era, there's other issues. I saw recently, and I agreed with it, that his statue was just removed from the Museum of Natural History in New York. And I agree with that for the reasons that it was done. It was a different era, but I still think his regulation piece was good. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No worries. So which governors or lieutenant governors, either kind of in Massachusetts' past or in other states right now, do you admire? And what would you seek to emulate about them, or which policy ideas of theirs would you want to introduce or build upon?
Yeah, so I'm going to say that I think that the sort of leader that I have been in my life and the sort of leaders I admire are transformative leaders. They are not caretakers. They're not somebody coming in just for 4 years or 8 years and staying in the position to do whatever so that they can tee up something else. I like people that come in with an explicit objective of making the world better. I think in Massachusetts, the only transformative governor that has been there during my lifetime as an adult, which I'm going to wind back to the late 70s, frankly, was Michael Dukakis. I think Michael Dukakis actually was pretty innovative in a lot of the things that he did. I know we had the Massachusetts miracle under his tenure. I know, like everybody, he had strengths and weaknesses. Nobody's perfect. But I like a lot of what he did and how he did it. I always tell the story that when I was in high school, my dad was working in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, at a company that I don't think exists anymore, but Simon Saw and Steel, a very mature industry. And I made him take me to Michael Dukakis speaking out there when I was in high school, so I could hear him speak as he was running for re-election. And, I just thought he was a guy that cared passionately, but was willing to promote new ways of doing things. And I think that's what we need going into as I talk about this transformative time, as we move into a post-COVID world where COVID's endemic to our lives.
Yeah, thank you. Next question, name one word that people who work with you would describe you, and one word that people who work for you would describe you as.
Yeah, sure. Transformative is the word that I would use. I know it's an awkward word, but as a leader, what I did was come in. I was a lot like an ER doctor. I would come in after a company was very, very sick, stabilize the company, and then turn it over to somebody else to grow it out. You know, so kind of like an ER doctor, a patient comes in that's not doing well, you just stabilize them, right? But in doing that, you have to transform the company a little bit. And so, you know, I view myself as a transformative leader. I think the people that would work for me would say, if I could make it 3 words, I would say, first, I listen to them because I'm not arrogant enough to think that I have all the answers. I don't. The people who are working on the front lines have better knowledge of it than I do. So I go and I listen. The second thing I do is I tend to be thoughtful. I try to think about it. And then the final, if I had to say a word, I'm direct, but I'm frank in the sense that I'm not going to lie to you, because the job that I'm trying to do, I need to win your hearts and minds and support. And if I lie, you're not going to believe anything I say, but I'm not going to sugarcoat either. I'm going to tell you why we're doing it, what we need to do, and how we need to do it based on learning from that. And so, you know, it's direct, but it's fair. And I think that's what people would say. So it's more than a word, I'm sorry, but that's how I describe it.
And thank you. And to close, say, after you talk with a voter, how would you want them to describe you in 1 sentence?
I would say innovative. You know, I would like to say that when they come up with, when after they've talked to me, they walk away saying, here's a guy who's not just going down the laundry list and the checklist of phrases and programs that have been there. Here's a guy who's actually trying to think deeply about what the problem is and create different ways of solving it. The best example I can give, and I'll keep it to just a sentence, is I believe in public-private partnerships. There's an institution in Scotland called Scottish Enterprises that helps small businesses get started and hire people over there. And I fundamentally believe that's a role that I can play here. And I think you do that by listening and learning from people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And if people want to learn more about your campaign, where should they go?
So my, and I can throw it in the chat. My website is bretbero.com. And Diana just threw it in there, so you can see it right there.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. And good luck. Hope to see you on the campaign trail.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind leaving me in for just a second to read the chat piece.
Yeah, you can stay in here. We're not like, feel free to respond to stuff in the chat.
Feel free to hang out, yes.
Thank you.
There are some questions in the chat I saw.
Thank you so much.
I'll try to answer those, but not disrupt anybody. I'll mute myself.
No worries. Thank you.
Can we just get a round of Zoom applause?
Thanks,
Yay.
everybody.
Okay, and then we can bring up the next candidate. Welcome. Welcome, Mayor Kim Driscoll. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, everyone.
Colleague Zayda and I are going to do our tag team interviewing today, kind of trading off back and forth with some different questions. But just to start out, that kind of familiar question is, tell us a little bit. Take a few minutes to tell us who you are and why you're running. And then for 15 minutes total for the interview, so keep that in mind as you're answering questions. But yeah, take it away. Who you are and why you're running.
Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you to all of you for carving out time to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you a little bit about who I am and why I'm interested in running. You know, I really feel like I'm Mayor Kim Driscoll, Mayor in Salem, Massachusetts, just elected to my 5th term. I'm running for Lieutenant Governor because I really want to work on issues that matter and make a real impact. That certainly is what has driven my desire and interest in being mayor. And I think as Lieutenant Governor, in addition to being the chair of the Governor's Council and the Lieutenant Governor's Advisory Council, I really want to amplify the issues of cities and towns across the Commonwealth and be their partner and their advocate. As mayor, I've been on these front lines, leading on issues ranging from COVID response and recovery, climate action, housing affordability, racial justice, and public education. As mayor, I also chaired the Salem School Committee. In fact, we just had our retreat this morning. I'm leaving a 3-hour retreat with a group of school committee members who are pretty dedicated, working for our kids. I really believe that local government is responsible for the things that people rely on most from government. Educating your kids, keeping your neighborhood safe, investing in those favorite places where you make memories, parks, beaches, downtown squares. What we do locally has a big impact on our Commonwealth, and how our Commonwealth interacts with our communities has a big impact on what happens locally. As we come out of this pandemic, I really want to bring my know-how, my experience, my skills to collaborate with communities and ensure we rebuild, recover, and reinvest in an equitable and inclusive Commonwealth. It's certainly not lost on me that we live in a Commonwealth, not a state, right? There's not a legal distinction to that, but we do know that Commonwealth is meant to do good, to bring people together with the idea of improving the lives of everyone who lives here. My hope as Lieutenant Governor is I can work on improving the lives of everybody who lives here. It's what drives my values and my enthusiasm for the work.
Thanks so much, Mayor Driscoll. Appreciate it. And living in Malden, Salem is one of my go-tos, except during Halloween, because I just can't. I'm not a native, so I don't know my way around the back roads like I'm sure you have to if you live there. My first question, and it kind of, again, people are probably getting tired of hearing this, but I'm just going to keep banging this drum. I did a lot of work during the pandemic on mutual aid, and gathered with a lot of my neighbors because I saw how much our government was kind of lacking in a rapid enough response. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, how would you evaluate the state's response to COVID-19, and what would you have done differently? And how can we assure that the next time something like this happens, what policies or ideas would you bring forth to prepare us better?
Yeah, just want to write that down. So I think the state overall has had some things we've done really well, and some areas where I think many cities and towns felt a little alone and individualized. Certainly the ability to get people vaccinated at mass vaccination sites, given the rates that we're at, I think has been really strong. Clearly there are gaps in that. We're experiencing that for sure among people of color, individuals who don't have access to easy access to vaccine sites. But I think overall, we followed the science as a state. I think we worked hard to try and make sure that was what was guiding our way forward. Some of the things I would do differently, as I said, I think many local leaders felt a little alone. I know that we didn't wait to act on things like pool testing in schools, setting up our own testing sites, working to ensure that the most vulnerable members of our community we're getting food, we're getting access to broadband, we're recognizing that they had a community of neighbors around them. We organized 500 people through Salem Together to ensure that neighbors knew who neighbors were, and we were checking on each other. We set up a regional quarantine site, the cities of Salem, Lynn, Peabody, and Beverly, like almost overnight, right? These were actions where local leaders really had to step in because frankly, there wasn't anybody else coming to do that work. We've also had to work individually on a number of policies. Right now, Salem has a vaccine requirement in place for indoor dining, indoor gyms, indoor entertainment areas. It would be a lot easier if we had a regional policy in place. I want to recognize that there's different things happening in different parts of the Commonwealth, but reporting out the health data going forward, I would say, reporting out health data, being better prepared. There are 351 cities and towns, and there's almost that many individualized boards of health working and sometimes not as collaboratively as we need to. We need to invest more in public health. We need to make sure we're focused on prevention. We need to build those trusting relationships now. So when we're talking about vaccinations or testing or whatever the next public health challenge is, we're not trying to nurture those relationships at that time. We've already got them in place. We're working those muscles. That wasn't the case during this pandemic. And I also want to be clear, like we had to build and fly a lot of things. This was not easy. There was no playbook for this. So I want to acknowledge we did have a lot of strong partnerships from the state. There definitely was some gaps. And I think going forward, we want to make sure we're better prepared in how we communicate, who we have relationships with, particularly vulnerable members of our community, and ensure that we have the resources around prevention. And in my estimation, as much as we love the flexibility of operating locally, having some real ties that bind us when we think about metrics and tying that to action so that we're not dealing with, do you have a mask mandate? Do you have a vaccine requirement? And ensuring that we're thinking collectively about health. COVID doesn't stop at any city or town line, and we really need to make sure we're approaching our solutions to it like that.
I agree. The patchwork is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very, very, very true.
I've had morning revelry at my house who's not happy about a vaccine requirement. And it'd be a lot easier. There's safety in numbers when it comes to addressing a lot of these issues.
Indeed.
So talk a little bit about the office itself. How would you describe the office of the Lieutenant Governor to voters, and especially about how the office can be used to advance kind of progressive policies? And to focus on one specific role of the office, the Lieutenant Governor chairs the Governor's Council. Although often overlooked, the Governor's Council plays an important role in judicial confirmations, parole board confirmations, and pardons and commutations. And what priorities and perspectives would you bring to that part of the job?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think the Lieutenant Governor role, I know it's been hailed as somewhat undefined, but I actually think that creates an incredible opportunity. You definitely will need to partner with a strong governor. The fact that it will be a strong female governor is not lost on me, and I think there's an opportunity to collaborate in a strong way. I do think there needs to be a strong focus on our relationship with cities and towns, how we amplify that work, how we connect and ensure that policies at the state level are impacting cities and towns in a way that works for them and works with them. And sometimes that's a carrot, sometimes that's a stick, sometimes that's getting out of the way, but there is this symbiotic relationship. And I think it's really important in this role that you have somebody within the corner office who you know you can rely on and work with as we come out of this pandemic, tackling some of the toughest issues, all of which need a local touch. We're not going to solve the housing crisis without working in cities and towns to address affordable housing. We're not going to tackle climate change and certainly climate justice without working on the ground in cities and towns and that grassroots. And we're certainly not going to handle all of our needs within schools. That's probably one of the areas I'm most worried about, not just because I just came off the school retreat, but I think kids have been have had the biggest impact through this pandemic, been some of the biggest victims. We've gone through a really tough set of circumstances. We're not going back to what we used to do in schools. We're certainly not going to do what we're doing now. We have to come through this and transition to the next phase. And there are 260 odd school districts all doing it very differently. And right now, the people that we need engaged in thinking about what that next transition looks like, they're feeling like they just stormed Normandy. I mean, I was with a group of superintendents who are beat up, tired, and don't necessarily have the bandwidth to look above the treetops and think about what are we doing next September. That's a role where I think an active local lieutenant governor in concert with local officials is going to have your ear to the ground and understand there's nobody coming to do that work. Like, we're the cavalry that's got to stand up for what kids are going to need in September. And we need to put all things on the table. The same schedule that we're operating. Is that what we're going to be doing in September? How are we thinking about the teaching profession? I've got some of the best teachers in our district who are burnt out, feeling unsuccessful, and ready to give up on a profession. And that's not good for the next several years. So there's a role here, I think, for the lieutenant governor to really be a strong voice and collaborator with local government. But let me just get to your question with respect to the Governor's Council, because I think that's an important one as well. We do have a judicial nominating process, and we have a collection of governor's counselors who work in concert with the lieutenant governor who chairs that group to think about who is going to be serving on the bench, ensuring that we have a diverse pool of candidates, ensuring that people really know how they can apply for these roles. I think it's a little bit of an insider game at times, how to apply, how to ensure that we're setting goals and benchmarks, and that we're keeping score. I really feel like boards and commissions matter. When I came into office here locally, we wanted to open up that process. You shouldn't have to be a friend of the mayor or know somebody to join a board or commission. And it's the best thing we've ever done. We've got talent on our land use boards that frankly we couldn't afford to hire. And these are people who are giving back to our community, most of whom I didn't know, certainly before I became mayor, sometimes even after they're appointed, but they're giving back. And I think looking at these appointments, are we keeping track, not just on the governor's council, those are certainly important appointments, but there are a range of boards at the state level that we want to make sure represent our communities and represent our values. And I think tracking that, opening up the process for applying, and ensuring that we're intentional about that is really important.
Thanks so much. So a little kind of a softball question. Who are your political role models and why?
Ooh, good question. I mean, I go to Angela Merkel because I think she's been an amazing leader, very strong, savvy, avoids drama, has really led that European Union. I think we're going to miss her, right? So she's somebody that I would point to as a person who is principled. I can't say I know all of Germany's policies, but I think she's been a woman, and sometimes often the only woman in the room that has had to take on some courageous choices with regard to immigration, with regard to standing up to hate and bigotry. And I think she's done an admirable job of it.
Yeah, PBS just did a great documentary on her. So
I'll have to,
if you have time, check it out.
I will.
And then kind of, in a way, on a similar note, kind of what governors or lieutenant governors, either in Massachusetts' past or in other states, do you admire? And what would you seek to emulate about them, or which policy ideas of theirs would you want to introduce or build upon?
Ooh, Jonathan, good question. I mean, I'm fortunate to have been in mayor. As I said, this is my 5th term, so I was able to work with Governor Patrick. I never felt like we had an inspiration gap when he was governor. There was these visions that were put out, and then the blocking and tackling to try and achieve them. So he's somebody that I'm fortunate to know, and somebody that I think always gives good counsel. And I think led in a very value-driven way and built a strong grassroots team and organization. Let me think. To be honest, I don't know as many lieutenant governor candidates. I think that speaks to the position of it really is a team, right, approach. So I would point to Governor Patrick and really just, I think that whole value-driven approach to governing has been a part of the way I've led here in Salem. I wasn't born in Salem. I didn't grow up here. My dad was in the Navy. I was born in Hawaii. My mom was born in Grenada and grew up in Trinidad. We've lived in a lot of places. Like, I know what it means to be the new kid. And I think that has really, growing up in a bicultural family where you're not really in your same hometown has really driven me to think about what it means to be other, and how do we make sure we're looking out for someone who may not have grown up here, doesn't know all this, doesn't have all the same traditions and habits. I'm proud that we're raising my husband, Nick, who is 2nd generation bricklayer, proud member of Local 3. We're really glad to be raising our 3 kids in this community. I came here to go to college. I fell in love with my husband. I fell in love with the city, and I never left. And I'm hopeful that value-driven approach, to me, that's my North Star, how I think about this work. And I think we need that in state government for sure.
Okay, I'm gonna go with the another softball question. During the pandemic, I know that I've kind of tried to find a place to center myself, to recharge my batteries, because like you said, it's just, nobody's coming. We're the only ones, right? So I like to take a walk along the beach, or like to drive up to walk around Pickering Wharf when it's freezing cold, because there's nobody there, and window shop. Where would you go in Massachusetts to recharge your batteries? What do you?
I hope you had a wharf rat when you were at Pickering Wharf. That adds to your walk. All right.
Absolutely. And then a picture with Samantha.
Samantha is not even from Salem. I mean,
I know
history, but she's here. People know her. For me, I'm a water gal. I really love the coast. I can't imagine not living on the coast. My favorite place in Salem is Winter Island. You should definitely check that out. Add that to your list. It's an old Coast Guard seaplane station that's now a waterfront recreational park. We have a beach there that's called Waikiki Beach. And my kids think it's the only Waikiki beach, which I think is really funny. Right? But I love the coast. We vacationed in P-Town. We vacationed in Block Island. Block Island's gotten way too unaffordable for us, but we love the water. We love the coast, and that's where we typically end up. But I will say, having spent some time out in Western Mass, I just feel like your shoulders immediately detense, and you just feel like you're in God's country when you head out there. So we're fortunate, I think, in Massachusetts to have so many places that you can feel centered. During the pandemic, I started walking to work. I found that it was the only way that I actually got outside. There were these long days, COVID meetings. You all can imagine what it was like in these especially those early days trying to respond. And just that, 30, 35-minute walk to work felt like much needed in terms of getting your head straight in the actions that we needed to take.
So one very quick question and then our closing. So the very quick one, we've all gotten to spend far too much time at home during the pandemic. What is your favorite binge watch that you've discovered during COVID?
Oh, garbage TV has been my go-to. Nothing heavy. I think Schitt's Creek got me through COVID, right? I was late to that. And my mother has got me hooked on 90 Day Fiance, like, which I feel like I'm a voyeur in somebody else's life. But it is, my parents are retired and live in Mexico. And it is the one thing that we can connect about. Did you see what so-and-so said, right? Absolutely apropos of nothing, but.
Nice. And then for the closing question, after you talk with a voter, how would you want them to describe you in one sentence?
Qualified, inspiring, and ready to lead.
Good choices. Well, I'd say, and before we kind of close it out, if somebody wants to learn more about you and your campaign, where should they go? KimDriscoll.org. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk with you. You know a little bit more about me and my bad habits of watching garbage TV. I'm grateful for the work that you do. It takes all.
You'll be surprised how relatable, I'm sure, 90 Day.
Okay.
I am grateful for this time and all the work you're doing to help our Commonwealth. Make sure when we say all, we mean all. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and get a round of Zoom applause.
And good luck on the campaign trail. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Hi, welcome. And let's say I'll give a shout out again for the good tech transitions. Kind of Representative Dr. Tami Gouveia, welcome. Well, as we're doing, Zayda and I are a great tag team. Host kind of set of interviewers. It's going to be 15 minutes total. So keep that in mind as you answer different questions. But to start out, the typical one, tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're running.
Great. Well, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you, Jonathan and Zayda, and everybody who's here. I mean, over 200 people, that's amazing. And I know some folks are watching on Facebook as well. So just really proud to be here, and it's an honor to be with all of you. You know, as a candidate, I love the endorsement process because I love being able to talk about my values and the work that I've done throughout my career and how I put the health, well-being, and dignity of everybody at the center of the work that I do, and that I intend to do the same exact thing as the next Lieutenant Governor for the Commonwealth. I also just want to say, you know, shout out to all of you in Progressive Mass. I hear about, you know, the fact that I have 100% on the scorecard from people all across the Commonwealth. That's really a testament to the work that you all do, and really have appreciated our partnership. Just really proud and grateful for the support of those who are in the room, who already support us in this race. And because you know me, for those of you who don't know me, I look forward to getting to know you and hearing about your top issues and giving you a chance to get to know me and hopefully earning your support as we go through the next couple months. I know we're going to have a meaningful conversation here for the next probably 12 and a half minutes. But one of the things that I really want to highlight, especially given the real threats to reproductive justice and reproductive health care, is just how proud I was, you know, to sort of culminate some of my work as a community organizer into founding the Massachusetts chapter of the Women's March. We celebrated 5 years of the Women's March yesterday. We know that the Women's March has really contributed to strengthening our democracy, strengthening a lot of progressive policies, and really serving as partners to the work that we're doing here in Progressive Mass, that we're doing in the Democratic Party, and just, you know, doing all across the state and the Commonwealth. So the reason why I'm running, and the reason why I've been doing the work that I've been doing as an organizer since I was in high school, honestly, is because of the experiences that I had very early on growing up in the city of Lowell. I was very lucky that my grandfather was in the Carpenters Union. That gave my family a lot of stability and a lot of opportunities that I know so many families when I was growing up did not have access to, and that so many families continue to be really excluded from in so many ways. And I was really inspired by the work that and the experiences that I had in the city to become a social worker. And it's been hard as a social worker. You know, we oftentimes don't really make the investments that we need in the social work field and in supporting a lot of the folks who really care for our health and our mental health and the education of our students. And as a social worker, I've had some of my own financial struggles. In 2008, I was laid off during the recession that we experienced. I was a single parent at the time to my kids who were 6 and 3. So a lot of the financial struggles that so many of our families are contending with now, many of them for the first time because of COVID, I've been there. But quite honestly, we know that so many of our families, thousands of families all across the Commonwealth have really been suffering financially for decades because of a lack of investment from government, the ways that community doesn't always have everybody's back. But I was lucky. I knew that I would land back on my feet, even though I was an unemployed single parent, because of the privileges that I have as a white person, because of the privileges that I have as an educated person and someone who grew up here in the state and someone who has connections. And I did land on my feet. Part of my story is I moved to Acton. I started organizing in this community as well. I became the state representative for the 14th Middlesex District, which I am really proudly to have been representing in the Massachusetts House of Representatives. And along the way, I became a doctor of public health, and now I am here running for lieutenant governor. So this is a testament to a lot of the work that we do here as progressives and that we do as the Democratic Party is making investments so that people can go from among the lowest points in their lives to really the highs, and really, making accomplishments that they didn't think were possible, really being able to support their families in the ways that we all want to, and that we all care so deeply about our children, and being able to thrive and contribute back to our community. So I'm running to be your next lieutenant governor, to put the health, the well-being, and the dignity of every single person in our state at the center of the ways that we make decisions. I believe that it aligns with the work that we do as progressives and the work that we should be doing as Democrats. And I look forward to the conversation that we're going to have here for the next 10 minutes or so.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Tami, I'm just excited to see you. And my first question is kind of delving into what, you and I have spoken about in the past about COVID-19. Yeah. And I'm just curious, how would you evaluate the state's response to COVID-19? What would you have done differently? And how can we ensure and strengthen that Massachusetts can be resilient with anything that comes our way?
Sure. This is a doozy of a question, just giving a lot of my background. So I'll try to give it, a minute or so to answer this question, but I would give us a C. And that, because the way I interpret the question is really how have our state leaders done in managing the response to the COVID crisis? I've seen nothing but a privatized response that has continued to leave so many of our families behind, particularly our BIPOC, immigrant, and low-income families behind. It's why, I've been calling for, right from the beginning of the pandemic in late March, I filed legislation to get cash benefits into the hands of our working families and our gig workers, because they've been left behind in terms of the pandemic response. Really been calling on the governor and the House and Senate leadership to get free rapid antigen tests into the hands of every single person in our state. It's something I started working on back in February of last year. The long lines we saw and the ways that we really were not putting people's health, well-being, and dignity at the center of those decisions is why we saw those long lines. It's why we saw people scrambling to try to get access to tests. It's why we saw people scrambling to get access to vaccines. So I would have done things differently by really, first and foremost, at the beginning of the pandemic, is having a long-term plan. We know from history that we would be exactly where we are with a second variant coming. We're already having evidence of the fact that a second wave of Omicron is hitting some European countries. So we are not out of this yet. We need a doctor of public health in the corner office to guide us through the continued response to the pandemic, and a social worker who has lived experience really struggling on the edge of financial disaster to be able to put the well-being of our families at the center when it comes to an economic recovery that is just and that is fair and that is sustainable long-term, not just a quick fix and a Band-Aid to problematic decision after problematic decision. We need real solutions to the issues with our pandemic response. So I give us a C- because the Massachusetts people are the reasons why our vaccination rates are as high as they are, and why we've taken care as much as we humanly could, taking care of each other, from our philanthropic sector to our nonprofit organizations that have, and our teachers associations and others that have really been beating the drum to make sure that we are taking care of our students and our teachers, that we're taking care of our essential workers and our frontline workers, and really putting their health and their well-being at the center.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then to
Thank
talk a little bit about the office of the LG itself. How would you describe the office of Lieutenant Governor to voters, especially how the office can be used to advance progressive policies? And then to narrow in on one function of the office, the Lieutenant Governor chairs the Governor's Council. And although overlooked, the Governor's Council plays an important role in judicial confirmations, parole board confirmations, and pardons and commutations. What priorities and perspectives would you bring to this part of the job?
Yeah, so I think there's tremendous opportunity in the role of Lieutenant Governor to really, the person, and I expect to be the next Lieutenant Governor, I will be rolling up my sleeves to get to work, building coalitions and working groups, bringing diverse perspectives into the ways that we are making decisions. When I look at the advisory boards, you know, the kinds of people who are not on like the reopening advisory board, for instance, no teacher, right? Nobody like that represented on the reopening advisory board. So the people who are really impacted by the decisions that we're making out of the corner office, they need to really be engaged in meaningful ways. And so that's the opportunity that I see with the Lieutenant Governor. So in my first 100 days, I intend to create 5 separate working groups. The first is on a just COVID response and recovery. The second is focused on humane housing and affordable housing. The third is on climate justice. The fourth is on childcare. These are the main issues that we really need to be focused on. And then the fifth is our mental health crisis. We haven't even begun to contend with what the impacts of the mental health snapback really is going to be. Our young people are truly suffering right now. I've had conversations with high schoolers, you know, over the course of the pandemic. They're suffering. They recognize that their parents are suffering and that we don't have the workforce to meet those needs. So those are the opportunities that I see outside of the stated responsibilities on the Governor's Council. And as it relates to the Governor's Council, I will advocate with the governor for expanding the criteria of who we're selecting to be on lifelong appointments to the bench and also appointments to parole boards. And there's a whole host of other positions that also get funneled through the Governor's Council. We need to have an expanded view around systemic racism, implicit bias, and also the role that childhood trauma plays in crime and in criminal activity, making sure that we are supporting people rather than criminalizing what are oftentimes, quite honestly, very normal responses to trauma that folks have been experiencing, some of them experiencing for several decades as young adults. So those are the things I see, and also advocating for clemency and pardons, and even, you know, extending, this wasn't part of the questionnaire, but, you know, extending to, you know, being able to give work release and time so that people can be with their families. I think that's critically important for the family unit, and it's really important for our communities. And, you know, that's how I look at expanding and advocating for racial justice within the role on the Governor's Council.
Thanks, Tami. Name one word that people who work with you would like just use to describe you, and give me one word that people that work for you would describe you.
I think people would say that I'm bold, that I'm a bold leader, because I've stood up to very powerful interests, particularly in the House of Representatives. And people who work for me, I think that they would say that I'm compassionate because of the ways that I look at people as a whole. And I really, as a leader, I believe that we should be setting conditions for others to succeed. It's why I haven't, quite honestly, voted for a Speaker of the House yet, because I don't see them, the ones that we've had in my tenure, really putting and laying out the conditions for others to succeed. So I think that people would say that I'm compassionate and bold.
And so which governors or lieutenant governors in Massachusetts' past or in other states do you admire, and why? And what would you seek to emulate about them, or which policy ideas of theirs would you want to introduce or build upon?
For me, it's Governor Dukakis. I have had nothing but such lovely conversations and interactions with him. He's been incredibly supportive, and I don't mean in this role, but in the work that I've done as a state representative. You know, I'm Greek, he's Greek, so we talk about some of our Greek connections. You know, that's just been kind of a fun thing for us, but also his focus on transportation and addressing income inequality are things that I really, truly admire. I think, you know, our income inequality in our state is at truly, it's a crisis level, and we don't talk about it enough as at a crisis level, and it really is. And just thinking about the work that he did as governor, I think to try to address some and prevent some of the income inequality that we see, I think is what I hold pretty close. Interesting question, by the way.
we like to mix things up. We like to mix things up.
Yeah, I like it.
So tell me what your favorite binge on TV has been since COVID, and name a spot in Massachusetts that is your kind of reset place where you kind of re-energize.
Yeah, great questions. Okay, so I love the beach. So I'm going to start with your second question first. So I'm a Cancer. I was born in July. I have always just enjoyed anything near the water. So any beach, I am there. That is really, truly my reset place. My binge has been a whole bunch of different TV shows. We picked back up Ozark last night. So I think I'll be binging that for the next, I think there's, I don't know, 3 that are coming out and then another 3. So that's the one I'm into right now. But we bought an Oculus. And so that's really been my binge, is playing the Oculus, I'll be honest.
Wait, what is that?
VR, virtual reality.
Okay, virtual,
yeah.
Got it.
It's a little wild. I have a lot of opinions about it, but it's been also really fun way to get exercise.
Okay, nice. And then the closing question is, as you after you talk with a voter, how would you want them to describe you in 1 sentence?
Tami is the leader we need to meet the moment that we are in right now, with her background in public health, her experience as a single parent, and her dedication to public service throughout her whole life.
Awesome. And then before we close, if people want to learn more about your campaign, where do they go?
Yeah, to learn more about our historic campaign, because this is an opportunity to have 2 women in the corner office, which no state has ever broken that barrier. You can learn more about our historic campaign at TamiGouveia.com. We will put it in the chat. Kristen Ellico is my campaign manager, and she is here with us as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much. I think we got a round of Zoom applause for Tami.
Thank you, Tami.
And a round of applause for all of you. Thank you so very much.
See you on the campaign trail.
Okay. Welcome, Senator. Welcome to our next up, Senator Adam Hinds. So again, to give your kind of quick intro, Zayda, Ortiz, and I are our wonderful tag team interviewers this afternoon. We'll be trading off with questions. It'll be a kind of a 15-minute block, so keep that in mind as kind of you think about the kind of length of different answers. But to start us off, can you just take a couple minutes, tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're running?
Okay, great. Thanks to both of you, and thanks to everyone. I gotta say, we're a year after the insurrection in Washington. It's heartening to have all of you taking time out of your Saturday to make sure the infrastructure of democracy is in place. And so thank you for participating and doing your part. You know, very quickly, I'm currently a state senator for 52 municipalities in Massachusetts. I'm running for lieutenant governor because I firmly believe we are at a unique moment, a time when we've seen so much exposed about our greatest weaknesses. Certainly a lot of strengths in terms of people coming together, but between COVID-19, our ongoing racial awakening, the economic downturn, they've revealed so much about what not just needs fixing, but simply what needs to be changed. And so it's a rare moment when we're seeing that, people are acting on it, and we actually have the money and the resources to do something and make progress. And so more of the status quo is not what it calls for. And if we do not make progress at this moment on addressing inequities and disparate outcomes by income, by race, by neighborhood and geography, then we will have failed. And that's what got me in the race. And it's gonna take not only visionary leadership, but folks with a background and bringing people together. Real quickly, I grew up in a small town in Western Mass. saw the shifts in the economy impact my own family. My dad left a tool manufacturing company to take on his own retraining at the age of 50 and became a teacher. And that just kind of, you have that perspective of we're dealing with a legacy of problems in our economy related to stifled mobility and wage stagnation, high housing costs, and beyond. After grad school, I went to the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. After grad school, I joined the Kerry campaign to try to get W out of office. That didn't work. So I joined the UN for 10 years and was involved in conflict negotiations in Iraq, eventually a territorial dispute between the Kurds and the rest of the country. 2 years in Jerusalem as a regional advisor to the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East peace process. And then finally on Syria, working with Kofi Annan on a ceasefire and then removing Syria's chemical weapons program. But I wanted to get involved in issues back at home. And so I came and moved to Berkshire County at that point and led 2 nonprofits, one related to guys getting involved in violence, and then another one focused on mental health. So, you know, I brought all that with me into the state Senate and into this race. The race is going well. We've rolled out a couple dozen endorsements. Senators Gomez and Sear and Comerford and Rep. Sabadosa and a range from across the Commonwealth. And so that's been a great start. I'll just maybe close with this, another personal point. You know, I just became a father 8 months ago. And when you're a parent, it brings more and more urgency to this fight, right? You're fighting climate change with the urgency of now, but so that my son can actually just kind of live, fighting so this generation can experience social and justice and racial justice differently. And in fact, my son Rafael is part of the migration story. My wife Alicia is Mexican-American, and her grandfather came to the US, drove trucks his whole life so that his family could find opportunity. And my wife is now a professor and just knocks it out of the park every day. And yet that intergenerational mobility is almost unheard of today, according to the data. And so that's you know, what I'm here or why I joined the race, to kind of restore that sense of opportunity, to fight hard for it. I believe I'm the progressive who can win. And so I'm excited to get to know you all in the coming months and do this work together on the other side of this campaign.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I am a local organizer in Malden, Massachusetts, and during COVID-19, my attention really got down to the local level, helping organize a mutual aid group. And so the COVID-19 response and the crisis that we're still in is near and dear to my heart. So my first question is, how would you evaluate the state's response to COVID-19? And what would you have done differently? And how can you ensure that the next time something like this happens, we are better prepared?
I love the question. The state's response has been late. It's often only moved when forced by either the federal government or by public pressure to actually take actions. There was a failure out of the gates to understand how dramatically different our health outcomes are and would be by income, by race, by neighborhood and geography. And so we got a glimpse right out of the gate. You'll remember standards of care proved to be racist in outcome, right? Denying care to folks with comorbidities and overlooking the fact that people of color have higher rates of comorbidities and would then therefore be moved down the list for treatment. It was the first of a series of very serious missteps. And so there you go, as a starting point. I think, what would you do differently? We're in the middle of kind of these head slapping moments. Like, why have we not learned that we haven't even had the fundamentals in place for testing, for PPE, for vaccines, when we knew there was going to be a winter surge, we knew there was going to be a post-holiday surge, and we weren't prepared. And so even now it feels like we're kind of tiptoeing forward when we should be sprinting when it comes to, you know, the governor said, oh, we'll put forward $10 million for 2 million tests. Why are we not doing 5 times that? And that's why the legislature is stepping in. And so that's been important. So, but there you go. Those are some of the elements in terms of shifting our public health systems, recognizing that there are disparate outcomes by income, race, and geography, and doing something about it, and then putting those fundamentals in place moving forward related to testing, PPE, vaccines, and making sure we have community level approaches so that that each of those are being impacted by neighborhood that are disproportionately impacted.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, thank you. And then to drill into the office of the LG itself, have two parts. One, how would you describe the office of the Lieutenant Governor to voters, especially how the office can be used to advance progressive policies in the Commonwealth? And then to zoom in on one role of the office in particular. The Lieutenant Governor chairs the Governor's Council, and then although often overlooked, the Governor's Council plays an important role in judicial confirmations, parole board confirmations, and pardons and commutations. And what priorities and perspectives would you bring to this part of the job?
Maybe I'll start with that one. I view it as an opportunity to have an active hand as an ex officio member in criminal justice reform. And you're right that it's judicial appointments, pardons, and commutations. And so those judicial appointments are critical for true judicial or criminal justice reform. And so I would, in my vision of how we can reshape the judiciary, that means moving towards a system that is focused on addressing underlying factors contributing to crime or the reasons why folks are maybe coming into a courtroom, encouraging and moving towards restorative justice, community-based programming. The first nonprofit in Berkshire County that I started after the UN was, like I said, for high-risk youth getting involved in violence. And you see pretty darn quickly that we weren't dealing with the actions of one kid. It was often, a legacy of racist institutions and income inequality concentrated in certain neighborhoods in the city. And why were we not focusing on that rather than trying to put kids behind bars? And so that was the motivation of the program, and that's what I see as being more, being a critical part of how you can work with the judiciary. And in a larger sense, for me, I think the Lieutenant Governor's role, I'm excited about the opportunity to reimagine it because, that's kind of where the definition of the role stops is the Governor's Council. And I view it as being able to push the governor's agenda, but in particular, I would want to be a convener and really mobilize the full strength of the executive branch. An example I've been giving lately is I filed a bill to create an Office of Racial Equity. It's my view that this is an amazing opportunity to say every secretariat, so every member of the cabinet, you have to convene with the Lieutenant Governor on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis. What are you doing to address kind of racial inequities in your area of control, be it healthcare, and I've just mentioned some, or education, or choices in transportation, either the kind of legacies of infrastructure locations and environmental justice implications, or otherwise, and housing. What are you doing to overcome the legacy of redlining and disparate home ownership by race? I think that is what's pretty darn exciting about the role. But you've got to put someone in there who can do it and who has a history of doing that. And so that's pretty exciting. Finally, I would just say what I've liked about lieutenant governors who I've met is that everyone in town has their cell phone number. So I think that's another great role, is cutting the red tape in the executive branch. And I'd give you all my cell phone and you can call and text. And I think that's an interesting and important function.
Thank you. Kind of a little softball question. Who are your political role models and why?
Interesting. I mean, obviously, when it comes to just the big picture nationally, I'd have to say like Elizabeth Warren, someone who's just never been afraid to speak truth to power, never been afraid to scream from the mountaintops. And oh, by the way, putting forward good policy proposals and being rational in doing so. And I think for me, I'm often asked the question, hey, you spent all that time working on conflict reduction, and now you're in a political position in a contentious moment, contentious being a nice word. How are you bringing people together to get things done? And it is often saying, look, here's why I'm progressive. Here's why I'm promoting a progressive policy. It's based on X, Y, and Z, fairness, equal opportunity, and here's why we need to take these steps. And I feel like that's an approach that she's taken, and it's really appealed to me.
Great. I definitely have probably a number of fans of hers in the room. So building on that in a way, what governors or lieutenant governors, either in Massachusetts' past or in other states, do you admire and why? And what would you seek to emulate about them, or which policy ideas of theirs would you want to introduce or build upon?
Lieutenant governors in other countries. I guess or in other states. I haven't thought about that. I guess I have to do some research on lieutenant governors in other states, but
you could do governors in other states or even in
yeah, you could do governors. I mean, I only remember bad lieutenant governors, so.
I love it. Great, so governors, look, geez, look, man, oh man, I don't know. I'm hesitating because for everyone that I'm coming up with in my head, I have a couple reasons why not to support them. But
you can highlight on the good things and acknowledge the bad.
all right. What jumped into my head is Gavin Newsom kind of leading when he was a mayor on LGBTQ issues and rights long before other folks, and so that's always stood out at me. So.
Oh, that is a valid answer. Name one word that people who work with you would describe you, and name one word that people who work for you would describe you as.
One word, not one sentence, huh? Okay.
We're trying to keep it brief. We're trying to keep it moving.
Yeah, I got you. Convener, I guess. It might be one. I think what I'm trying to get at in one word is, someone who's determined to go after the big issues and underlying inequities. That was not one word.
Can you
close enough? Close enough. If I said a sentence, like most politicians, if I sent a sentence, you'd say a paragraph. So
in my mind, there was a hyphen in between each of those, so it's kind of a word.
Sure, compound words. We love them. So we've all been spending like far too much time at home during the pandemic. So what has been your favorite binge watch that you've discovered during COVID times?
Oh boy, I definitely spend a lot of time on Game of Thrones. Ted Lasso recently just kind of got, I thought that was interesting. Didn't see it coming, spending a lot of time on mental health issues and especially with athletes. So that's been an interesting turn of Ted Lasso. That's not a spoiler, is it? No. That was interesting.
Oh my God, I haven't seen it yet. Perfect. And just to kind of wrap it up, kind of also after talking to a voter, how would you want them to describe you to others?
Okay, maybe I'll go back to my one-word answer. I just think that it's, a loving warrior that's like determined to go after the big issues, someone who's focused on inequities and using this moment to take on disparities by income, race, and geography, and bringing people together in the process.
Awesome. And then before we close, if somebody wants to learn more about you and your campaign, where should they go?
For now, we have a website, adamhinds.org, that I'll throw in the chat, and we can go from there. Of course, I have Twitter accounts and the like.
And what's to drop that in the chat as well?
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Yes, we always like to follow Twitter handles. New Twitter handles to follow.
Thanks again to all of you, and for everything that Progressive Mass is doing in the political ecosphere in terms of just keeping everyone's, putting forward a strong agenda and keeping everyone accountable. So it's great.
Awesome.
Lots of love for that.
Thank you again for joining us. Can I get a round of Zoom applause for Senator Adam
Thanks
Hinds?
so much. We really do appreciate you joining us this afternoon. Good luck on the campaign trail.
Thanks.
And then our final kind of LG candidate for the afternoon. Welcome, Senator Eric Lesser. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. As I've noted, other folks.
Hi, Zayda. Hi, Jonathan. Am I the last one?
Yes, you're our final one. So thank you. As we've been doing, the two of us are going to trade off questions. It's going to be 15 minutes total, so keep that in mind as you're answering different questions. But the first one to start us off is that kind of ever-present question. Just take a couple minutes to tell us who you are and why you're running.
Thanks so much, Jonathan, and thanks, Zayda, and thanks everybody for bearing with this and sticking with me as the last person. So I'll assume it was luck of the draw and nothing but
alphabetical.
That.
Alphabetical. We did alphabetical, to be fair.
No, but I appreciate the chance to come on. I do want to particularly thank each of you as an activist for your work. The first time I really got involved in political activism, I was 16. And the principal of my high school in Western Mass, public high school, Long Meadow High School, called us all into an auditorium, lined a whole bunch of teachers up at the front of the room, and said that they weren't coming back next year because of budget cuts. Frankly, because of decisions that had been made in the building I now work in. I remember being 16 and sitting there and feeling pretty angry that a bunch of kids were being asked to pay the price for bad decisions that had been made somewhere else. And so we went out and we did a Prop 2.5 override. Many of you have probably been involved in these in your own communities. We went out and knocked on doors. And I remember sitting in the town hall the night of the election and watching the town clerk kind of count the ballots and declare that the measure had passed. And one of the teachers who was sitting next to me, she literally ripped up the pink slip that she had been holding in her hand, threw it in the garbage because the vote passing meant that her job had been saved. And so I felt pretty lucky that as a young person, I was able to see, despite the messiness and the frustrations of politics, what a difference it can make in people's lives. And I know we all share that view, or we wouldn't be on a Zoom on a Saturday afternoon for the, how many hours in are you? So I just want to again say thank you. So from there I caught the bug, and my big break was I went to work for this skinny guy with a funny name from Illinois, Barack Obama. My break was that I got to carry his suitcases all around snowy New Hampshire during the first in the nation primary. I then traveled with him to 47 states and 6 countries during the course of his 2008 campaign. Ended up working in the West Wing, 40 feet from the front door of the Oval Office for David Axelrod. I worked as his assistant. He was at the time the president's senior advisor. Then went to work at the Council on Economic Advisors. I was there, worked closely with Elizabeth Ward and her team on the passage of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, worked on the Affordable Care Act, and the passage of the Affordable Care Act was there for the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Met LeBron James, met the starting lineup of the Red Sox. There were some perks to being there, but I was eager to get home to Massachusetts. And the reason I was eager to get home was probably, I think, not dissimilar from why all of you are so involved, which is I had learned and I had been kind of taught that change, doesn't come from the State House. We know change doesn't come from the State House. It doesn't come from City Hall or even from the White House. It comes to those places through activism and mobilization. And so for the last 8 years, I've been working in a community that frankly is invisible to decision makers on Beacon Hill. At the height of the opioid crisis, worked closely with the Attorney General's office to set up a Narcan bulk purchasing program, reduce the price of Narcan for hundreds of communities across the state. Almost all of the communities represented by where you all live have participated in that. Life or death. If a school nurse shows up at the scene of somebody who has overdosed and has Narcan, the person is likely to live. If they show up and don't have Narcan, the person is likely not to live. At the height of the COVID shutdowns in 2020, we didn't trust Governor Baker to do this on his own, so we wrote into legislation I led the effort on in the Senate to center the response to communities most impacted by COVID. $600 million went out the door to dry cleaners, to small bodegas, to community restaurants, to nail salons, to barbershops. We wrote into the law that the money had to first go to businesses owned by minorities, by immigrants, and located in neighborhoods that were the hardest hit by COVID. So what would I do as Lieutenant Governor? Well, first, I understand the job. The job is to partner with the next governor and to make sure that she's a success. And it does look like we're going to have a Democratic governor and a female Democratic governor at the end of 2022. And I'm personally committed to doing everything I can to make sure that we do that. We are going to get East-West Rail done. We are going to link our entire state by high-speed rail service from Pittsfield to Boston. I see many familiar names on this call who have worked with us on that effort. It is now at the 20-yard line. It is literally on Joe Biden's desk. We need a governor, a lieutenant governor, and a MassDOT that actually invests in public transportation and makes this a priority. And by the way, it would be the single biggest climate project in the state's history It would take thousands of cars off the road, reduce greenhouse gas emissions more than any single investment the state has ever done. And I know we are eager to get to questions, so I just want to close by just mentioning quickly the Governor's Council, which is something that I think often gets ignored or kind of short shrifted in conversations about the Lieutenant Governor. I am an attorney. I'm a member of the Massachusetts Bar. I'm vice chair of our Judiciary Committee in the Senate. And I will center criminal justice reform as chair of the Governor's Council. And I will prioritize a diverse judiciary, diverse in every sense, racially diverse, gender diversity, geographic diversity is important too, to make sure that all regions of our state are represented in our judiciary, and also perspective. Governor Baker has appointed, I think, too many prosecutors. We need less prosecutors, frankly, and we need more public defenders, environmental attorneys, public interest lawyers on the bench. And that is something I would focus on as chair of the Governor's Council, which of course approves all judicial nominations. So I'll stop. I probably went over. I appreciate everyone bearing with me as the last speaker. And I hope you'll give me some consideration in my campaign. And I will share in the chat my website, just if people are interested in signing up or learning more, or even making a small donation. Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you, Zayda.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, you kind of covered some of our questions, so we're just gonna keep it moving. But my name is Zayda, and I'm a organizer in Malden, Massachusetts. I'm also a board member here at Progressive Mass. And since the pandemic began, one of my passions has been working on the mutual aid front, organizing with other neighbors to try to keep our community intact. So my question, which is very dear to me, is how would you evaluate the state's response to COVID-19? And what would you have done differently? And how can you ensure that the next time something catastrophic happens, that we are prepared to be more resilient?
Well, thanks for the question. It's obviously very urgent right now, and it has been ongoing, and we have to learn from what's happened, because there will undoubtedly be another pandemic and another public health crisis, in the near future. First off, there's a few things I would say. Number one, and I've been one of the most outspoken critics of Governor Baker in terms of how COVID has been handled. Joe Comerford chairs our COVID-19 oversight committee that we've participated in, actually questioning Governor Baker. 3 different occasions he's come to our committee. There's a couple of things that I think have been the most glaring gap. First of all, the vaccine rollout, especially in the early stages, was completely botched. And I saw this on the ground in Springfield, which is a city I represent. The Eastfield Mall, well, first of all, when they first announced the vaccination sites back last year, there wasn't a single one in Hampden County, which is one of the lowest income counties in the state, is home to Springfield, Chicopee, and Holyoke, 3 gateway cities, as well as many rural communities that lack adequate access to healthcare and are also plagued by significant poverty. And it wasn't until we actually sounded the alarm as a delegation that they even entertained the idea of putting a location in Springfield. And when they did, they put it at the Eastfield Mall. For people who are familiar with the geography of Springfield, it's far away from transit access. It's on a more suburban part of the city on the border with Wilbraham, and it's about an hour by bus from downtown. So there were a lot of problems with that site. In addition to the issues around the vaccination outreach, there was inconsistent communication with our boards of health. They were in fact often giving conflicting guidance to school districts and to boards of health about what they could do, what they couldn't do, when masking was required, when it wasn't. So a few things I would do as Lieutenant Governor is, first, we need to build out our public infrastructure for public health. Governor Baker made a policy decision to basically privatize the response and send it out to companies like Curative and other contractors, rather than empowering our local boards of health and our local community leaders to be the front door of the response. I would change that, and I would move back to a public model for public health. The next thing I would do is I would have a much more intentional strategy around neighborhood to neighborhood vaccine outreach. And again, I've seen this in Hampden County, which is one of the lowest vaccinated counties in the state, because again, we have a combination of urban poverty and rural poverty that has created a challenge in getting vaccine access out. We need to localize the vaccine outreach. We need to empower, again, local voices and community voices, and we need to work with trusted partners. We can't privatize it and have no big contracts going out to companies based out of state. Running the response. There's a lot more there to unpack and talk through, but I am trying to be mindful of the time restriction.
No worries. That's not like, as we know, people, our questionnaires, these are good compliments to our questionnaire where people can go deeper. You, in your opening remarks, you kind of spoke to the question that I've been asking people about the role of the role of the LG, especially with the Governor's Council. So I'll go to one of my next questions about what governors or lieutenant governors, either in Massachusetts' past or in other states, do you admire and why? And what would you seek to emulate about them, or which policy ideas of theirs would you want to introduce or build upon?
Yeah, great question. That's a very good question. So I, a couple of lieutenant governors just around the country that I really admire. I have a lot of admiration for John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. Another lieutenant governor in Wisconsin, Mandela Barnes, is a friend of mine. I've actually had him speak at my class that I teach at the Kennedy School. And I think in particular, his response in 2020 and in 2021 to the ongoing racial justice and policing challenges, in particular in Wisconsin, and how he handled that and how he brought voice to those communities and got real reforms done and got real changes done is something I really admire. So his work is certainly something I'd want to emulate. Also, closer to home, the reason in part that we have Worcester-Boston rail service is because after the Obama stimulus in 2009, Governor Patrick turned to Tim Murray, who was his lieutenant governor, and said, get this moving so that we can get Worcester-Boston service done. Of course, Tim Murray was the previous mayor of Worcester. He understood how important that link was. And the proof is in the pudding. About 10 years ago, that link got set up. Worcester is now the second largest city in New England. Its population went up 14% between the 2010 census and the 2020 census. So it shows what can happen when you have a lieutenant governor working in a focused way on a complicated project like that. So now we've got to get the service Worcester west to Springfield and to Pittsfield. So I'd say, those three would be the ones that I would look to the closest.
Thanks so much. Quick kind of softball question. Who are your political role models and why?
I appreciate that. I appreciate that question. I mean, certainly President Obama. I had the honor of working very closely with him for more than 4 years, being in a lot of long drives with him and late night flights. And I must say he's someone that threw a whole lot of stuff that was thrown at him, some incredibly vicious and nasty and racist. I never once saw him lose his cool or lose his temper. And he's always just been, a deep role model for me on a very fundamental level. And I would say, through history, probably the leaders that I admire the most are probably FDR and what the New Deal meant, for Massachusetts and for our country. And the country we had after FDR's presidency versus the one before, and probably Martin Luther King as well.
And then, so we've all been spending probably far too much time at home during the pandemic. So what is your favorite binge watch that you've discovered?
Well, I just wrapped up Curb Your Enthusiasm. So and I've got to, I'm a little biased, but I got to say Veep, and I highly recommend Veep. I worked on the Veep team for 7 seasons. And sometimes it hits a little close to home, but I would have to say those two.
Good choice. Thanks so much. So last question. After talking to a voter on the door, how would you want them to describe you to other people?
No, that's a really nice question. I think maybe earnest. I try to do my best and try to get things done. And I hope they maybe come away with the impression that we're doing our best here to try to move some issues forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for spending time in the afternoon with us. And before we let you go, if people, you noted this earlier, but if people want to learn more about you and your campaign, where should they go?
So they can check out my website, ericlesser.com. We've got a form on there also if you're interested in helping us at the convention. I'd be honored if you'd be willing to serve as a delegate. People can also call or email me. It's very easy. It's just eric@ericlesser.com or info@ericlesser.com. And you can also check out my website where you can sign up for updates, join our email list, all that.
Awesome. Well, can we get a Zoom round of applause for Senator Lesser?
Yes, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you spending some time with us.
Take care.
And so who is going to do, I'm happy to spotlight whoever's doing our closeout.
It'll be Caroline.
Caroline, and before I hand it over to Caroline, putting on my NPR pledge drive hat again for the, we are now only 36 pledges for the Fair Share Amendment away from hitting the goal that we have. So I will.
There's got to be someone here that hasn't signed it yet. There's got to be. So
if you haven't signed it yet, I just dropped it in the chat as a reminder. You can sign it now. You can send it to a friend. If you send it to one friend, 2 friends, 3 friends, we might hit it by the end of the day. And then dropping in the chat the link about the Votes Act as well.
Yes, and thank you, Jonathan, and thank you to all the candidates if you're still here. Really great experience, and I hope that the 176 people that are still on here have enjoyed it. So thanks again, and we're gonna pass it on over to our darling Caroline.
Hi, thank you. That was really fun. I really enjoyed listening to everybody, and I hope everybody who stayed on did too. And a huge shout out and thanks to John and Zayda and the entire Elections and Endorsements Committee for crafting the questions and for conducting today's interview series. And to Nazia for live tweeting, because she has been live tweeting the event. And so many important issues were discussed: the pandemic response, public health infrastructure, criminal justice, climate change, mental health, towns and cities. It's been very interesting to hear the different takes that the different candidates have had on this job. And someone else said it, but afternoons like this are what democracy is supposed to look like. So it's good to have everybody come listen to the candidates and really hear from the people that they're going to be voting on. We hope you feel inspired and that the afternoon helped you get to know the candidates and begins to help you differentiate among them and who in your process of considering which candidates you want to support. Also, to help you, please check the responses to the candidate questionnaire. If you haven't seen the candidate questionnaire, it's very in-depth, but I tell the candidates they really should, once they've answered that questionnaire, they're going to be prepared for anything. So it's actually really helpful on their candidate journey as they're required to come up with answers just for forums like this. It's also really nice because we have the candidates on record. So yeah, we are frequently surprised, and you can really see the differences that show up in these candidate questionnaires. So you should really take a look at these candidate questionnaires. They're fascinating. The next forum with interviews with other constitutional office candidates is coming up. I don't think we quite have a date yet, but look for it late March or early April, and we'll get the rest of the candidates. And so be sure you're looking at your email for that announcement, and please support our work. If you have not joined, please join. I'm hoping everybody here is a member because one of the benefits of joining is the chance to vote on our endorsements. So, but the bigger benefit is knowing that you're adding your voice to our grassroots effort to really push Massachusetts to have the policies that our residents deserve. So thank you all for staying. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate all the support. Have a nice afternoon.